Hi, guys, and welcome back to Level Up with Lou, the podcast where we help you live your best life, pursue your dreams, and love yourself. I'm your host, Lou Oni, and I am back with a brand new episode for you guys today. Today, I have got she's actually amazing, the amazing Justine Cochrane. Justine is a certified life coach who helps women who are obsessed to obsess less so they can create more. She's helped clients hit their goal weight, build six-figure businesses, write books, get into fulfilling relationships. And in today's episode, she's actually here to talk about motivation, how to stop measuring your self-worth on external achievements, as well as how to work smarter, not harder. So thank you so much for coming on this episode. How are you?
Hey Lou, thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited for this conversation. So, before we get started, can you share with us your personal growth journey and how you actually became a life coach, please?
Absolutely. So, I had followed a very sort of traditional track. I went to university, I got a job right out of university, and started to work my way up the corporate ladder. And about 5 years into that, I found myself like in the corner office with the assistant, having like the job and everything that I thought would make me happy. And I
Yeah.
wasn't. So
Mm.
I thought, like, oh my goodness, what's wrong with me? Like, I've got to fix this. So I ended up hiring a life coach. And that was my first sort of interaction with coaching and my first exposure to it. And it just blew my mind. It changed everything for me. And so I had a baby shortly after that, and I got certified on my maternity leave. And it's just been gangbusters ever since.
Wow, that is so awesome. Something that I actually really wanted to look into as a career was life coaching. So it's really honestly cool to have you on this episode. What would you say is your favorite part of your job currently?
Oh my goodness, like all of it. And if you're interested in it, like go for it. It's the best job ever. I literally just help people change their
Yeah.
lives. And I love it. Like there's nothing more fulfilling than being in a call with someone and them having a breakthrough that's going to like change everything for them going forward and being able to
Mm.
help like facilitate that and walk alongside. It's the best feeling.
Let's talk a bit about motivation because this episode is going to be about motivation. What are some things you've noticed commonly in your clients that you work with in terms of the things they struggle with motivate with in terms of motivation?
Yeah, for sure. So, what I find is my clients and myself tend to start off with a ton of motivation, like they're super excited and energized and just like ready to dive in. And then that
Yeah.
really starts to drop off quickly. And I
Mm,
think the more exposure you've had to that pattern of getting really excited and then losing motivation, the harder it is to sort of build yourself back up.
yeah.
So I've spent a lot of time and energy like researching motivation, watching myself, watching my clients. And I've sort of found that there's sort of two reasons that people lose motivation. And the
Mm,
first one is like your human brain's just doing its job, right? So as humans, we're supposed to like seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy at all costs. So,
yeah.
like, from that sort of like evolutionary standpoint, totally makes sense to stay on the couch. And then the other reason that we tend to lose motivation is because you're dealing with like a motivation draining emotion. So something
Mm,
else is coming in that's sort of like sucking your motivation. And I found that there's only four emotions that tend to do that. So, like fear. So, feel a fear of failure or like fear of looking bad in front of other people, doubt, like you don't think you can do it. Or if you're feeling confused, that's the third one. And then the fourth one is self pity. So, that's sort of where I find people like lose their motivation, but it's so fun
mm.
helping to like build it up and bring it back.
Wow. I've never actually heard anyone put it that way in terms of like there's actually things that suck out your energy and help make you feel less motivated. What are some things that actually help you personally feel more motivated to accomplish your goals?
Yeah. So, the thing that I find really interesting about motivation is it's just an emotion, right? And
Mm,
like, I subscribe to the life coach school and like their thoughts. So Brooke Castillo, who says that all of our emotions are created by our thoughts. So the
Mm.
reason that you're not feeling motivated is because you're thinking something that's causing you to feel like doubt or fear or confusion or self-pity. So like keep a real good eye on what your brain's serving up and like what it's suggesting as thoughts, because you can believe
Mm.
those or not, and you can
Yeah.
redirect it to another spot. So like when I'm feeling unmotivated, it's usually because I'm feeling really overwhelmed. Like I have so much to do and I'm never going to get this done. And like I don't even want to start. And so I
Yeah.
keep a real close eye on like those thoughts and what's coming up. And then I kind of like play the devil's advocate and I go like, okay, like how do I know I do actually have enough time to do this? How is it going to be
Mm.
amazing when I get there? And start to think like the thoughts that are way more motivating, because the
Mm.
default setting is to be unmotivated. Like that's what your human
Yeah.
brain wants you to do, right? But if
Yeah.
you're really aware of that and intentional with your thoughts, you can just sort of build motivation on demand by thinking things you actually believe. Like it can't just be an
Mm.
aspiration. You actually have to believe it. And
Yeah.
then like repeating that to yourself and sort of building that thought pattern instead of the default one.
That's so true. Because I completely relate with the whole feeling overwhelmed when you have so many things to do. You're just like, where do I even start from? And
Yeah.
that honestly sounds like such a great technique to use. Um, a lot of people really struggle with motivation, especially like, trying to lose weight. I can relate. Trying to go to the gym, trying to eat healthy. And I noticed that you said that you actually work with clients to help them actually stay on track and reach those kind of goals. How
Yeah.
do you personally help those clients?
Yeah, weight loss is like one of my favorite things to coach on because it is such hard work, but it's like the best work you could do for your brain. Like, let
Yeah.
alone all the side effects for your body, but just like watching yourself manage your mind as you go through a weight loss process, you are going to learn so much about yourself. So,
Mm.
with that particular situation, what I do is I recommend that clients create a protocol for themselves. So, they look ahead into the 24 hours ahead and write down everything that they intend to eat.
Hmm.
And then all you do is try and stick to that protocol. And your brain is going to serve up so much drama. It's going to give you like all the excuses for why you should go to the pantry and like find the chips, right? But it's so interesting because the reason that you're doing that, oh,
With my
she's got
chips.
chips. She's showing chips, you guys. That's hilarious. Lou, I love you. That's amazing. And it's like the reason you're reaching for those chips is because you want to feel a certain way, right? Like
Yeah.
they're going to let you like relax. It's like, oh, I deserve a break. Like this is going to make me feel good. Yeah. And so just sort of like watching your mind and like seeing what those thoughts are as they come up is fascinating. And I think urges are so interesting that way. But if you just sort of allow an urge instead of resist it, it can tell you so much about like what you're missing in your life and what you desire more
Mm,
of. And then you can
mm.
go about creating that intentionally instead of like using food as a buffer for avoiding negative feelings.
Wow, I'm smiling so hard because this is so powerful. Because even when you said the fact that like you kind of have the urge because you feel like, oh, I deserve it. I've worked hard. Like literally, my Friday feeling was I've had a long week. I've worked hard. I deserve we call it crisps over here. I deserve crisps if I want to have crisps. And it's yeah, like
Yeah.
as you said, you have to find a better way of channeling those urges and actually getting what you actually need, which is oftentimes it's not food. It's not that it's not that I'm hungry. It's just that I have the feeling where I feel like I should do something that I deserve, really. So yeah, I can
Yeah. And it
completely
like
understand.
that was hilarious when you held those up. Like I'm dying. That was so funny. But and I've got to say too, like I don't think there's anything wrong with crisps if you like love your reason for eating them. Like if they're on your protocol and you're like it's Friday, like I want to celebrate, that's going to be great. Do it. But it's more so like the clients who find themselves in the pantry with like half the bag gone and they're like how did I even get here? Right? Like I don't
Yeah,
even remember
yeah,
walking over here or opening the bag. It's like that default.
yeah.
So I think like as long as you're intentional and you're making those decisions from like your prefrontal cortex ahead of time and you love your reason, like go for it. But it's so
Mm.
interesting if you set a protocol for yourself and just try and stay on it for 24 hours. The stuff that comes up is hilarious. Like the
Wow.
reasons I find myself eating, hilarious sometimes. Yeah. So it's a really fun exercise if you want to give it a try.
I love that. In our pre-interview, you mentioned the fact that you struggled with perfectionism. Talk us through how this actually affected your productivity and your motivation.
Yeah, for sure. Perfectionism is like, I swear, my life's work. Like it's so fascinating to me because I'm such a perfectionist and I've had to like really recognize what that looks like for me and leverage it in a way that works or it literally
Mm.
will consume my life. So for me, it was a lot of like trying to get it right and figuring out the best way to do things and doing it perfectly. And that was creating so much like pressure and inadequacy in my life. So I was
Mm.
terrified to take any action in case it was wrong, and I was like really worried about starting anything in case I couldn't do it like perfectly or the right way. And I found
Mm.
myself like looking for all sorts of like outside feedback and like mentors and just like someone tell me how to do this, please. And wasting a lot of time there and not like trusting myself and allowing myself to create things just based on what like I felt like people needed. I was really worried about like how it was perceived and how it would be like judged, I guess. But the funny thing is
Mm.
like people don't really care what you're doing. They care about what they're doing. So do
Right?
your thing, right? Serve your people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's been really interesting to sort of like get coached on that a lot, and sort of recognize the patterns that come up for me. And it's a everyday work in progress thing.
Hmm. Wow. As this is one of the other podcasts you've been on, you kind of mentioned, oh, you kind of talked about mental health and perfectionism and the link between like anxiety and depression and this. Obviously, as a society, I feel like we're becoming more obsessed with perfection in terms of like the kind of images we show on Instagram. So we'll show like we have this perfect life. We like are always striving to like work hard and achieve our goals and just make a life that we dream and hope for. And sometimes we don't really show our journey as to how we get there and the struggles that we've been through. But what do you actually think the link between perfectionism and mental health is?
Yeah, for me, my perfectionism created a lot of anxiety because I was never really like living in the moment with what I was doing and following my
Mm.
heart on what would make me happy. I was
Yeah.
constantly like 10 steps ahead, anticipating how I was going to screw it up, anticipating how it was going to go totally left or how I was going to fail and what would that mean for me and like what would people think about me. So I think
Mm.
like I have a psychology background. That's what I did my degree in. And so I've done some research around like how it does relate to depression and anxiety and all those things. And just
Mm.
like you were saying about society right now, I think perfectionism is almost a weird badge of honor. Like, oh, I'm a perfectionist. That means I try really hard. It means I do everything right. But it's not. It's just, it's a cage that can be really hard to get out of. And it's
Mm.
really scary when people aren't even aware of like their perfectionist tendencies and they just sort of take over their life and they're not really like living anymore. They're just anticipating what judgment's going to come their way and trying to
Mm.
adjust accordingly. So
Mm.
I I also find too with perfectionism though, trying to overcome perfectionism becomes even more pressure. So there's a way to like, I've got to do this right. I've got to get out of this. And that just creates like more of that restrictive behavior.
Yeah.
And I think like perfectionists do sort of excel at planning and setting goals and having like a really clear picture of what they want to create. So often
Mm.
I help clients like leverage those skills and abilities that are like natural in their personality and try and like remove the judgment and like the pressure that's coming from the inside but is perceived as outside pressure.
Mm. You seem so self assured and so self aware. Have you always been like that? And if you haven't, how did you get like this?
I definitely haven't. Like I remember for years, like coming home from work, like my 9 to 5 corporate job, and just feeling like so anxious and not knowing why I was anxious, and like having to have like 2 or 3 drinks to just like take the edge off, and like mellow into my evenings with my husband and stuff. And I like could not put my
Mm.
finger on what I was so anxious about. And it was totally that, right? Just like trying to live according to other people's standards and like follow this like preconceived notion of what I thought my life was supposed to be looking like and how I was doing it right.
Yeah.
So I've done a lot of coaching myself. So, like, I have a coach and I'm in like a group coaching program. I get a lot of feedback from outside people because I find it's so hard to see your own limiting beliefs, right?
Mm.
It's sort of like how a fish can't see water. They don't even know they're in water. That was me with my
Yeah.
perfectionism. And I've just been like peeling back the layers for years. And it's so funny because as soon as you've got one peeled back, like there's another one underneath it. But
Yeah.
that's a beautiful thing, right? Like that's the human
Mm.
experience. And I'm here for the good and the bad. And it's just fun to sort of keep learning and keep watching myself in scenarios to see how I'm going to react.
Mm. That's awesome. Take us back to, I guess, a younger Justine and, being anxious and not really sure of what life would be and where you would go. What would you tell, let's say, like a 16-year-old you about life currently?
Yeah, that's so funny. So, Lou, I'm 33 right now, so it's like half a lifetime ago, right? What would I tell the 16-year-old Justine? I think to like not be so like hell bent on achievement. Like I thought
Mm,
achievement was everything. And if I achieved something, I felt good about myself. And if I achieved something, I
mm,
felt like I was on the right path. And as much as I think it is wonderful to achieve things in your life, you have to love your reason for doing it. So
mm,
for me, I was just chasing the achievement. I was just chasing like that dopamine hit you get when you do something really good. And I would want to tell her to like focus more on being committed instead of attached to those outcomes. So, like
mm,
being committed to reaching a goal because I know that's who I am as a person and I love the journey instead of being like, oh, if I get to that goal, then I'll feel better about myself. Like I'll be a worthy
mm.
human, people will like me more. So, I think
Wow,
just sort of that difference.
I love that. Um, I always hear this phrase that you have to kind of learn to work smarter, not harder, because productivity is key and all that. And there's this idea that, okay, cool, Beyonce has the same 24 hours in the day that everybody has. How does she achieve so much in that amount of time? What would you say is like some good advice for people who actually want to work smart and don't want to like waste their time and want to actually really be productive?
Yeah, so I would say for sure, look at how, because it's funny because people usually think that they waste a lot of time on like social media or like, well, before COVID, commuting, like those type of things. But I find people waste so much time people pleasing. They might waste so
Cool.
much time like worrying, right? Like worrying.
Yeah.
I personally spend a lot of time worrying and it gets me nowhere. Like it
Yeah.
changes the result not at all. So I would keep an
Mm,
eye on like those things, like how much time you spend being confused about something when like truly you
mm.
know the answer and you're pretending you don't know because you don't want to do it. Avoiding things, procrastinating, like keep an eye on that stuff because that's the sneaky stuff that'll take up hours and just like drain your brain energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because I think like you have to be really intentional with the time that you do have. So like for me, when I'm planning my week, like I sit down for an hour, I download everything I'm going to do for that week as far as like writing it down on a paper. That's what I mean by a download. Like
Mm,
everything I think is going to take my attention, everything I know I need to do for my business, like that kind of stuff. And then I plot it into my calendar with like a reminder. So I use like an electronic calendar with a reminder that pops up and is like, girl, you got to do this thing. Right. So it's like
yeah.
setting it on autopilot. Like I use my prefrontal cortex to plan it ahead of time. So I'm not sort of in that like heat of the moment, like, oh, I'll just do it later. Like, doesn't matter right now. This is more fun. And definitely like sprinkling the free time in there and like the rest and the
Mm.
recharge. But I find that so helpful for me to create like a solid plan for the week. So I can actually like see if I'm making progress and see if I'm moving forward.
That's so true because I feel like whenever I schedule something down, I'm more likely to actually accomplish and actually do it. And I love the fact that you mentioned that it's important to also include time to rest and recharge and actually do things you enjoy as well.
Yeah.
What would you say is something that actually brings you a lot of joy and helps you to rest and recharge?
Yeah, for me, so I live in Victoria, BC, Canada. So I live on an island and I spend so much time at the beach. Like it's not even funny.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I was down there this morning with my kids. Like it's just my happy place. I love being in nature. And so that for me is definitely a rest and recharge. And then like when I'm working, I'm working. Like there are
Mm,
no social media tabs open. Like I know I'm there to do my job. I know exactly what I'm supposed to do, right? Because it's all on my calendar. So there's
yeah.
no like, oh, should I do this next? Like I don't know where the paper fit. Like, no, it's all laid out. We're there to get
Mm,
it done. So I
yeah.
find like scheduling that rest and recharge is critical to creating the amount of stuff that I do in a week. And it's funny because earlier this year, so I just created a digital course. And earlier in the year, I was trying to use my like free time to create that course. And it was such a struggle. Like I had no motivation. It was just like, oh. And as soon as I brought the free time and the rest back in and just sort of extended the deadline a little bit, it was a complete game changer. Like I was so much more excited about doing it. I felt like I had had a reset. I wanted to come back to it. So like that's I guess another thing about motivation. Like if you're really struggling with it, ask
Mm.
yourself, are you filling your cup? Like are you doing what you need to do to show up in a way where you can feel motivated?
That's so true because I find as well that like when I start to feel burnt out, overwhelmed, stressed, it's genuinely because I haven't been doing the things I would enjoy and I haven't really been intentional about the time that I have. Which
Yeah.
is actually why like I recently started to get into this thing where I've actually started scheduling me days, which are days when I do absolutely the things I want to do. Like because think about how many hours we spend working, how many hours we spend doing things for other people. Like sometimes you just want to just do the things that you enjoy. No distractions, no stress, no worries. I love to talk about personal growth. I mean, I made a whole podcast about personal growth. Um, so I actually wanted to ask you currently, what is an area of growth you're currently working on?
Yeah, my perfectionism always, because it shows up in every area of my life, like from my parenting to my marriage to my business to just how I like you say, like spend your free time and do what you love. So that's a big one for me. And also, like I'm building this business and growing a clientele and stuff. So just sort of trying to continue to show up in a way that really like serves my clients and manage my mind through that. Cause like sometimes
Mm,
I'll have a client who's like a huge deal and I have a bunch of insecurity about that, right? I'm like, what? She wants to work with me? Like that's crazy. And so then
yeah.
like really sort of managing my own insecurity about that, I would say that's a big area of growth for me as well.
That's so true. Have you ever dealt with imposter syndrome and feeling like
100%.
because I deal with that and I don't even I don't I struggle because I don't know what to do about it. I'm just like sometimes I just feel like should I really be doing this? Am I really worthy of this? Like I'll have like certain guests on who actually want to be on my show, and I'm like, where did you even find me? Like, do you actually want to be on this show? And sometimes I just think to myself, like, actually, no. Your show is, bringing purpose. It's actually adding value to people's lives. And if these people have contacted you and said they want to be on your show, then clearly they've seen something in you, that you don't currently see in yourself. So yeah, wow.
100%. Lou, you should 100% be doing this. Like, no, you're magic. Like, really, like, I listen, I love this podcast. It's amazing. So please don't doubt yourself. And I think that's so normal, right? Like, that's your human brain trying to keep you safe by
Yeah.
avoiding any possible pain. Like, it would just be easier to be on the couch, conserve your energy. So I think it's normal, but it doesn't mean it's
Yeah.
right, you know?
That's so true. Thank you. What would you say to someone who is, currently struggling in terms of like growth and leveling up their life and, maybe possibly even get into like a career or like a field that they feel like is more purposeful and more fulfilling to them?
What would I say to them? I think like the first thing is Like, find out what you're worried about. Like, what is making you sort of like hesitate or not dive in as quickly as you would want? Like, what's the fear there? Because usually,
Mm,
if you can name that fear and if you can get really specific about it, it diminishes by half. Because like anxiety loves vagueness. And so I find getting really specific on exactly what the concern is helps. And it also allows you to come up with a plan to overcome it. So I think that's the
mm,
first thing I would say. The second is like, don't be worried about failure because failing forward is the quickest way to get from like point A to point B. And I think as perfectionists, like that's a huge thing to overcome. I actually have
mhm.
created like a epic fail list. So
Yeah.
every quarter, I'm like pushing myself to fail 25 times. Like that's the point so that I
Oh,
can
okay.
grow faster through those failures. Instead of like trying to do it right and like do this perfectly and do that perfectly, it's like, nope, we're just putting it on the list. We're going to try and fail twice this week. We'll see what happens.
Mm,
So even taking that sort of an approach to it where there's not as much pressure and overwhelm, and just trying to keep it fun and like have a strategy, but not a strategy that constricts you and that speaks to whatever you're worried about, whatever that fear is, so you can pinpoint it and overcome.
I love that. Thank you so much. I wish you honestly had a lot of time to discuss this because I really honestly just enjoying this episode. One thing I really enjoy my guests to do and love my guests to do is kind of talk from their heart. Talk about whatever they want. So anything they want to share with the audience, whether it be words of encouragement, inspiration, any piece of advice. Is there anything you want the audience to take away from this episode?
Yeah, I think earlier when we were talking about the difference between like committed and attached, that is something that I just wish everyone had like an understanding around because it was so liberating for me. And so, if I can just speak to that for a moment, that would be amazing. Is that okay, Lou?
Yes,
Okay.
that's
So,
perfect.
when I think about like being attached to your goals, that's when it's like, I need this progress to show accomplishment and value. And you feel like anxious and frantic and like overwhelmed or even out of control. And it'll show up like you're asking or needing instead of serving. And
Mm,
the opposite of that is being committed. So that's when you like believe that something is going to happen for you, but you're not like really attached to the how or the when. And you feel like calm and powerful and centered, and you're serving instead of asking. And the energy is much more like it's done. And you're just sort of waiting it for it to happen. And I think that is where the magic is. And not to get
mm,
like too woo woo, but I really have found when I've switched over into just like trusting the universe to deliver what I'm asking for because it's a great fit for, humans, that's
mm,
when I can really be creative and have the space to create things versus being
mm,
like, oh no, I need this number of clients so I can make this much money. Like, that never works. So,
mm,
if you're finding yourself in that space of feeling really unmotivated and overwhelmed, ask yourself if you're being a little bit attached with your goals and you're finding that the outcome is going to make it mean something about you, and see how you can move more into that committed space and just sort of trust that it will work out and you're on the journey to figuring out how, and that's the whole point.
I love it. Thank you so much, Justine, for coming on
You're
this episode.
welcome.
I really enjoyed our time together. Oh, this has just given me so much joy, honestly. So thank you. And I'm sure our audience will gain something from this episode. If the audience want to connect with you and get to know more about what you do, how can they do that?
Yeah, so head on over to my website, which is justinecochrane.com. I'm just actually releasing like a brand new digital course on productivity. So if that's something you're struggling with, there's details on that there that you can check out. There's details for how you can work with me one on one. And also, I have a program for perfectionists where I teach them how to like leverage their perfectionist like abilities and talents and create amazing results. So it's all on my website.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Justine. And thank you guys for listening to this episode of Level Up with Lou. Let me know what you thought about the episode. You can email me at levelupwithlu@gmail.com. And don't forget to follow the podcast on Instagram at Level Up with Lou. I hope you guys have a wonderful week or weekend whenever I release this. Take care, everyone. Bye.